Serious. Ex-prisoners of Reddit, who was the most evil person there, and what did they do that was so bad? My mom was locked up with Selena's murderer. And we all know what she did. Every Mexican woman wanted to kill her, so they kept her away from everyone. Damn fucking Yolanda. So your mom never met her? Nope. She never spoke to her. But I remember as a kid visiting my mom and she whispered for me to look over at the other side of the room. And there that puta was. Looking just like the actress in the movie. My mom said she never spoke to anyone besides her attorney. I mean, I guess the death threats were crazy. Especially from some woman who bit her husband's penis off. One of the women on my wing cut up her lover and put his body parts in an empty TV box, then put the TV box on his mother's doorstep. I used to let her thread my eyebrows every fortnight until I found out what she was in for LOL. May I ask why you were there? There was also a girl on the same wing told me she was in for missing probation. I got on well with her. When I got out I started googling everyone and found out she was in for trafficking children. I was mortified. For anyone who lives in the UK, there is a program on Channel 4 tonight at 9 p.m. called Prison. It shows you the prison I was in, Foston Hall, Derby. Not in prison, but I was an intern in a public defender's office over 10 years ago, and the one that stands out was a juvenile locked up for the third time for raping kids aged 2 to 4. Kid was obese and clearly very damaged. This was a juvenile detention center that was often used as a babysitter by crackhead moms, accuse the kid of a crime, and get them locked up for the weekend so they could go on a bender. He was serving a sentence. I was warned going in there that he could turn violent at the drop of a hat, and the attorney was nervous about bringing a young female in, but I insisted. Kid looks me straight in the eye and says, "Don't let me out, I will do it again." I can't stop. He was hunched over, dead eyes and completely serious. At least he knows and is being honest about it. I'm glad he's making the effort to keep himself locked up. That's got to be the skinniest sliver of a silver lining ever. I'm here. I did 5 years in Leicester and Featherstone, Priscilla NS in the early 80s. One guy in Featherstone was a lifer and had done 30 plus years. Apparently he used to fuck young boys and cut their cocks off. When he was arrested he had a fresh cock in his pocket. Too bad the police didn't get there sooner for the owner of the fresh cock. Just for the people calling bullshit. There would most likely have been a suppression order on a case like this because the children were underage and the details could have been suppressed given the graphic nature, especially 30 years ago. Source: Court Typist. 40 years. Not sure about most evil but interesting story. When I did time I was bunked up with a guy who had stabbed his uncle to death, molested him. Guy was insanely mean, but when lockup came, he was super nice to me. He was 23 but couldn't treat her right, so we would dictate letters to his girlfriend and I would write them for him. When my dad went to jail he was shocked by how many young men couldn't treat her right. He made a lot of important friends because he was one of the few people able to help with legal paperwork. Edit. For those interested, in Ontario prisons, 65% of the population have less than a grade 8 education or are functionally illiterate. 79% do not have their high school diploma or GED. Is your dad Andy Dufresne? The words "I shot that bitch in the stomach and I hope they both die" were used in reference to a 15-year-old pregnant girl. I won't ever be able to forget that one. How old was the inmate? Mid-20s maybe. No idea what his relation to her was. Not really the kind of thing you ask about in that situation. Not OP, but I'm gonna take a wild guess that this one of those wife or girlfriend found out man was cheating with underage girl, got her pregnant, and decided she needed to pay because it's definitely not the man's fault he groomed a child or anything. It's obviously the teen's or man finds out underage girl is pregnant with his child and decides he'll get rid of it himself. When I was in the outbox the day before I was released I was hanging out with a bunch of guys just killing time. One of them was part of a mutie killing gang. They kidnapped and killed a bunch of people for body parts and cut them off while the people were alive. It was a pretty gruesome case. Anyways, he was really quiet and rather stupid. Just a simple farm boy type. Edit. Article about it. Why did they want the body parts? Probably organs trafficking I would say. English guy here. I spent 4.5 months in prison in 2018. There was a guy who was really nice, seemed like a genuine guy. That was until I found out he strangled his drunk wife to death and left her there whilst he went to work the next morning. The killing your wife and going to work like nothing is wrong thing. Years ago, husband trained a guy in his company and the guy forgot their assigned iPad one day. He told him to go home and get it. The guy went home, stepped over his wife's dead body in the kitchen to grab his iPad and returned back to work. About a week later my husband came home and told me what they had found out when the police came in to ask them timeline questions and more right before he was arrested. He killed her before work, was hoping that his alibi would be I was at work all day on base. I couldn't have done it. He made some critical mistakes. He would have been caught either way, but proof that he went home when her body was already laying there dead was another nail in the coffin for him. There was a correctional officer at least 6'5" and well built, and he would always come in pissed off. So one morning we are waiting in line for breakfast, and he thought he heard this older man call him a bitch. He followed the man back to his cell and started teeing off on him. The man didn't even try fighting back, and when he fell the first time he split his head open on the steel bunk. The inmate was so out of it he started asking where his car keys and wallet went while he was on the ground bleeding. The CO hears the man and for some reason turns around and goes back and hits him a few more times and says, "Who's the bitch now?" I'll never forget thinking, damn, this is somebody's father. They're probably both somebody's father. Before I got my prison sentence in 2013, I was in Arapahoe County Jail with James Holmes. Was pretty crazy cause they'd put the whole facility on lockdown to move him, even though he was in segregation. 12 life sentences plus an additional 3,318 years for that guy, deserves it. Reminder for anyone who doesn't remember, this is the guy responsible for the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shooting. And he did it just to kill people. IIRC he considered attacking someplace else, but was worried that people would ascribe a political motive to him. I was a CO, and we had an inmate like that. We didn't do a full lockdown, but every inmate had to be in their housing unit anytime we moved him. Couldn't have any other prisoners with any shot at getting to him. He was accused of beating a 3-year-old to death. None of the guards were thrilled, but it was our job to protect him and we did. Then when he was at the courthouse for a hearing, their dumbass security failed. Some other prisoners got to him and almost killed him before they were stopped. They could have killed him easily if they hadn't dragged it out to make him suffer. At his trial he was found not guilty. The reason high-profile prisoners like child rapists, former cops or school shooters are treated with extra scrutiny and protection, not cause of good-hearted prison employees, but cause they don't want to attract attention for someone attacking them. Bro, fuck Arapahoe County Jail. I've been picked up in 3 different counties, and Arapahoe was the slowest shit I've ever been through. Fuckers released me at 11:59, gave me a bus ticket, and no way to get to the nearest station in time for the last light rail. And that's to say nothing of their incredibly cramped ass cells. I read this like a Yelp review. What's crazy is that prisons and DA offices can be rated on Google. Unsurprisingly, they all have 1-star averages. I just picture someone giving their old jail a 1-star and thinking, that'll show them. I was incarcerated with over 280 people doing life without parole. There were all kinds: stabbed the neighbor lady 150 plus times, shot a bully in the head in the school parking lot, beat a dude with a hammer, etc. There were 2 that stuck with me, though one where he looked me right in the eye and told me about shooting a guy with a shotgun to the chest, creeped me the F out. Weirdo that kidnapped and killed some girl in his basement was another. John Wayne Gacy actually designed the miniature golf course there. The prisoners have a mini golf course? I need answers. Is there an ice cream stand? Go-karts? They did. I have no idea as to if they still do. There are all kinds of shit to do in some prisons. I was in a women's prison. New inmate told everyone she was in for tax fraud. Couple of days later, she gets the crap beaten out of her and doesn't leave her cell again. Food gets taken in by screws, and eventually she gets ghosted out. Turns out she was in our side, and both her husband and son were in the male side for running a child porn ring. Those guys had been put straight in the VP wing, but most female prisons don't have enough sex offenders to have one. It was one of the screws who told some of the inmates why she was in. They wanted her to be taught a lesson. The offenses were awful, she was fully part of it, and was responsible for acquiring a lot of the victims as she was trusted by people. Youngest victim was her niece's 3-month-old who had to be hospitalized due to trauma. Sorry to ask, but what's a screw? Prison officer. I was 16 but tried as an adult, so they kept me in a 21 and under pod. Malvo, the DC sniper, was in my pod. Also, one of the first people I saw in a chain gang was Charles Manson's brother. Swastika on his forehead and everything. Lesson learned: don't be a fuckboy. Fuckboy? What did you do related to that got you tried as an adult? Technically armed robbery with a deadly weapon. But in reality it was me and 4 other friends who held up a store one of us worked at with a plastic gun. Still ridiculously stupid, and I deserve everything that came from it, but it really was the life-altering event I needed. Didn't help that Jay Leno and David Letterman made fun of us on their shows either. LOL edit. Had the word either twice. And thank you everyone for all the support, really appreciated. I was locked up with Jodi Arias, so that was bizarre. There was also a woman who murdered her baby and kept it in the freezer. We called her Maytag. So from Arizona then. Any other crazy stories? Arizona sounds like a conservative version of Florida. Edit. I want more upvotes. Me hungry. Edit 2. Wow, gold for me? You weird boys, gals, Trigener fire dashes, thanks a bunch. The only difference is that Arizona is a dry Florida. I was in for a week. There was a woman there who got high, meth, and microwaved her baby. She was a fucking monster. Couldn't be in Gen Pop because people would try and kill her, understandably. My paramedic program director was called to a meth addict couple's place a few years ago. They had microwaved their baby as well. They said it was because she needed to warm up a bit. Virginia? Or is this more common than I thought? Not Virginia. Apparently more common than we both thought. That's fucking depressing. I was in JDC, not DOC, but most of the people in JDC were locked up for the same reason as some people would be in DOC. I remember talking to this kid, and he was kind of stupid in the head. I asked him what he did, and he raped his 10-year-old sister while she was asleep. Most of them were in there for murder, but he stood out since he was a sex offender. I worked with a lot of juvenile sex offenders over the years. Normally the best behaved out of the bunch, and when I would happen upon their convictions, it would always surprise me at how heinous some of their sex crimes were, compared to how subdued and/or polite they were when I knew them. The sad fact is that the overwhelming majority were in there for perpetrating the same abuse that they were simultaneously a victim to as well. Sad to see the circle of abuse and how it perpetuates itself. Same. I was a detention officer for a while, and I never looked too much into what the kids did, especially if they were well behaved. There was this one kid that was just great. Always helpful and never caused problems. One night in the control room I mentioned to a co-worker how awesome this kid was helping close up the kitchen, and she says, "Have you seen what he's in for?" I had not. So she showed me that he was actually in for molesting his 18-month-old baby sister. I'm a juvenile corrections officer and absolutely agree. The best behaved are always sex offenders. The worst are usually car thieves. I wonder why that is, in a psychological sense. I'm 20, was in and out juvie from 15 to 18 till I went to county jail. The worst people I came into contact was a boy 15 who shot his stepmother, slit her throat, beat her head in with a blunt object, wrapped her in sheets for the father's roommate to find her, then he shot him. Happened in McMinnville, Oregon. Other than that, a lot of people raping siblings and making threats to shoot up the high schools in the area. That's Yamhill County for you. Yamhill. The nothingness and drugs drive people mad. My almost cousin murdered his grandma in her house in Yamhill, the town. He claimed he thought she was an intruder. We're pretty sure he was after money for drugs. I slept in that room after and it was creepy AF. My grandma married her husband a few years later. They still went to see him until they couldn't drive anymore. I think his release date is coming up and I can't help but wonder what the world holds for someone who's been in prison longer than they've been out. This rich kid stabbed his friend in the chest, killing him, but he was on Xanax and weed at the time and doesn't remember anything of it other than his friend on the floor dying. The mad thing is this guy, 18 years old, actually got off with the murder and found not guilty, although was sent down for just under 2 years for possession of a knife. His parents were quite wealthy and it was a big case in the UK. Basically his barristers were the best money could buy and he said that's how he got off. Edit. He didn't have any remorse for his actions. Which was made to think made him a pretty fucked up person. It's a funny one though because he actually seemed a nice guy until he would talk about the killing and just didn't care what he had done. Nobody else in the prison had ever killed anyone to my knowledge as it was a lower cat prison, but he was only there for possession of a knife. Edit again. I didn't expect people to know the persons involved in this or as many responses. I am currently still on license, meaning I still have to report to the probation service and don't particularly want any blowback for mentioning this and can never be too careful. If anyone has any questions, PM me as I'm not answering specifics on a public forum. I know it's anonymous but just not worth the risk. Sorry. Was in prison for 27 months. Unfortunately, your child rapists and kitty porn guys were mixed into Gen Pop, so you would get all kinds like that everywhere. The worst one I heard of was when I was in military prison. Details are foggy because this was 13 years ago, but I remember there being a guy who got 99 years for murder. He had killed a guy, then killed the guy's wife because she was home and would have been a witness, but not before raping her first. The whole facility got locked down every time they moved this guy because they didn't even want the other inmates to see what he looked like. The other fucked up one was at the same facility. So in the army there's a thing called turtle fucking, where you hit someone's Kevlar helmet with your Kevlar helmet. It makes a loud thonk sound, but doesn't really hurt. People didn't hit super hard, just hard enough to make the noise happen. This guy turtle fucked a girl when she wasn't wearing a Kevlar helmet. She ended up dying while the guy was still awaiting his trial, and he went full on cuckoo bananas. Edit. For everyone asking questions about the logistics of being in prison and also about what I did, here is an AMA I did years ago about this topic. I hope that can answer some of your questions. I had a cellie in prison who was a KKK white boy. He was a madman. He was always pissed off and would say the craziest stuff like, "Did you hear that? The white rhino is going extinct. Fucking Jews." I was watching the movie about black pilots in World War II, and he sat down indignant and rolled his eyes and guffawed. "Black pilots, come on." I said, "You really think there are no black pilots?" He said, "Hell no. Have you ever seen a black pilot?" It was like this every day until my move finally got approved. "Have you ever seen a black pilot?" Isn't it the point of the movie? Yeah, but the Jews just made that movie to confuse people. In case you can't tell. My friend's dad was a volunteer chaplain, taking care of prisoners' religious needs at the county jail. He came into our criminal justice class to talk about working at a jail. He told us that the most evil people at a jail are the ones that show no remorse for their actions. He saw the guy that killed the foreign exchange student that attended the University of Utah, and he told us that the guy didn't seem to care at all. He was calm about everything. Kid in my history class shot up my school last year, killed 2 and injured 4. I remember when the cops got him, they got footage of him being taken into custody, and a reporter asked him, "What did you do?" He just started laughing maniacally and goes, "I killed a couple kids." So fucked up. Hands down. So this lady was married. Husband cheated. Had a full-blown affair, ended up with a love child. Somewhere along the line the wife is babysitting the husband's illegitimate child. He comes home from work, sitting down to eat dinner and asks her, "How is the baby?" She says, "I don't know." You tell me? This bitch ended up killing the baby, cooking it, putting it in the food and fed it to him. She's doing 2 life sentences. This is in Arizona, by the way. Side note. She looks like the devil. Her eyes are literally black and she looks like she has no soul. It takes a lot to creep me out, but this lady's vibe is deaf, one of the darkest things I've ever felt in my entire life. Did you meet her or is there a video or story about this? Sounds creepily interesting to see a person like that. I was on the same yard as her. There's only 1 women's prison in Arizona and only 2 max yards. We called her the Dragon. My dad went to prison for 6 months, and there's this one story that struck me the most. A guy was convicted for raping someone. When he was asked who did he rape, he said it was just some prostitute. Later that day when it was time for visiting, his wife went ballistic on him, screaming at him at the top of her lungs. Turns out he raped his 11-year-old stepdaughter. After the inmates and policemen found that out, they took turns in beating the shit out of him. I'm a CO in a sizable county jail. I've worked our PC pot a lot, and I've encountered some really gnarly people since then, including plenty of chomos. The worst though, the one that actually shook me was a dude about my age, mid-20s, tells me that he got busted for allegedly being part of a child prostitution ring. told me that the leader of the group would regularly force kids as young as 3 to blow him in front of folks at parties. I wanted to kill him. That situation was the one that made me start telling folks to shut up when they talk about their charges. I don't care who you are or what you did, I don't want to hear about it, cause if you did something terrible, it's going to affect my impartiality. I wasn't in prison, but my mom spent 15 years in one. She was at a women's only prison, since it was either that or she got sent to a different state. Where I live we only have 2 prisons that are in practice. My mom told me stories though. So there were a lot of women who killed their babies and stuff, or went crazy and killed their partners. My mom was the beige suits with the public of the prison, and not with the people in the AdsEgg. She told me about some crazy people she talked to though. Most were chill, in on some drug felony like my mom, but then there was this one lady who wouldn't talk to anyone, and baked and ate her 8-month-old. Pretty sick. I used to work the 5 a.m. shift at a popular gym, and I had a women's CO who worked the night shift, who would come in to work out and tan after work. Lord, the stories she told about the crazy ladies. Like one was pregnant and was regularly trying to body slam herself into the ground to kill it. She was mentally ill. I went to county jail. It was an eye-opening experience. The inmates were generally pretty decent. Most were just there because of a moment of stupidity. Others were there because they suffered from mental health issues. The evil people were the COs. Their behavior was horrific and disgusting. Jail is designed to strip your humanity, and COs are the enforcers of this paradigm. And y'all should keep in mind, jail and prison are not quite the same. Jail sucks more when it comes to the staff, because often they're poorly staffed, and many of the inmates are probably just there for stupid misdemeanors, and couldn't bail out, might not even be guilty, and yeah, the COs are power-tripping yockles, depending on the jurisdiction. Prison? Different ballgame. You can be locked in with some hard fuckers. It's actually better than jail in most cases, since there's more shit to do, but as long as you stay out of gangs and keep to yourself more or less, you probably will be okay. Usually run a bit more professionally. Bottom line? Try not to get locked up, folks. Do what you gotta do, don't hurt anyone, but incarceration sucks. Do not recommend. I had a few misdemeanors in Cobb County, Georgia. It's a highly populated jail in Metro Atlanta, and for the first 3 days you're there you're in transition dorms, until they classify you and put you where they deem. I've literally met them all. Murderers, rapists, child molesters, etc. But one guy took the cake. I saw him being checked out at the infirmary while I was seeing a state dentist. This man was an anesthesiologist who was putting women under and raping them, and also filming it. They got him, and with the videos. There were dozens and dozens of victims. Some of them were girls who were underage. I found it to be especially depraved. His name is Paul Sergila. There are many articles about him, and even more developments on his case after being sentenced and taken to prison. It's all fucked up, I'm just warning you. This Mexican MMA fighter type dude. Name was Spider or some stereotypical shit. Anyways, we are watching the fresh fish walk in, and Spider here starts moaning. Quote, "Oh fuck me, you see that white boy 3 from the back, or whatever, oh fuck yeah, he's mine." Well, this dude was tier boss or some shit, because without a hitch, this 18 years old boy is placed in a man's cell with this dude. I swear to God I thought someone was driving steel pilings into the ground that night. This sick fuck even got meds off the crazies because he said they made him feel like on meth and could go for hours. 5 days I was on that tier before being moved, and this kid laid crying on his stomach the whole time, always blood in his laundry when we got fresh drawers. The COs thought it was hilarious a middle-income white boy got turned out while being there for a low-level offense, first-timer. They would say, he won't fuck up again, will he? The nurses on rounds took him to medical for a huge prolapse. Mexican dude looked like you just took away his favorite toy. Fuck jail, man.
Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Tell me what you dislike or love about this video, so please comment below and hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime a new video is released. This is a WeCrow Media production.